Alright, so the first section you want to take a look at is the oscillator section, because these are what actually produce your sounds. So your first oscillator, it controls the other two, and it has four different wave types: the sine, saw, triangle, and square, iconic waveforms of the 8-bit era. You also have a detune knob, which detunes the sound. It's more apparent with a square wave. Anything above 0 and you can really hear it. FM is frequency modulation. The best way for me to explain this in a short amount of time would be to say it's a distortion. What it does is it takes the second waveform and applies that waveform to modulate the frequency of the first waveform. So that's what it sounds like. It would take a long time to fully explain frequency modulation, so I would suggest looking that up for yourself. But that's what that knob does. It controls how much the frequency is modulated. Second oscillator is a bit more complicated. It's more of a slave to the first oscillator, but because it's a slave, it has more slave controls. It has four different types of wave, or it has four different waveforms, just like the first, but instead of a sine, you get a noise oscillator, which creates just white noise. You have a track button here, which, if you look up here, it's KBD track, which stands for keyboard, if you are curious. Keyboard tracking, what it does is it'll track the pitch of the first oscillator. Anytime you see KBD track, that's what it's doing. So it's tracking the pitch of the first oscillator. And so when it's on, it'll apply that pitch to the second oscillator. When it's off, it doesn't. Simple. So it's playing an A4. The pitch knob can raise and lower the pitch in semitones. Look up musical theory if you don't understand what semitones are. So 12 would be 1 octave up, whereas 0 would be same octave. So there you go. And then you have a fine tune knob, which does the same thing as the pitch knob, but obviously it's a lot more fine because it's in synths, which are much smaller units of measurement than semitones. And then you have the ring and sync buttons. The ring modulation button, as you can see up here, ring modulation, is actually called amplitude modulation. So AM, FM, they're a lot similar. Again, it would take a long time to explain what ring modulation actually does, so all you need to know for now is it turns ring modulation on, and that applies distortion to the sound. Sync. What the sync button does is exactly what you may think it does. It syncs up the speed of the oscillator, the second oscillator, to the first one, so that they play at the exact same rate. And you may think that's good, but it takes away your fine tuning, your detuning, and replaces it with that grindy sound you heard. So I prefer not to use the sync button, because there's a better way to get that sound and get rid of this sort of annoying volume modulation that is automatic when sync is off. The sub oscillator is very simple. It has the same four waveforms as the first oscillator, and it has a volume knob, which increases and lowers how loud it controls how loud it is. That's the simplest I can put it. And it also has a 0 oct button and a -1 oct button, which oct stands for octave. It's exactly like using this pitch button. This is at 0, and this is at -1 oct. So that's all you need to know about the sub oscillator. This set of controls here all work afterwards. This works the exact same as the pitch knob. Takes it up in semitones, but it takes the entire sound up in semitones instead of just one oscillator. The mix button acts as a volume control in relation to the other. It adds volume control to both of them in relation to each other. So at full, all you hear is number 2. And at 0, so you can't even hear the noise now because it's at 0. So there you go, that's what that does. Pulse width. Pulse width only applies to pulse type waves. In this case, it's just the square. So if you're wondering why that does nothing to your sound, it's probably because you don't have a single square wave, and that's what it does. It to be a bit more precise, what it does is it takes this top line here, and it makes it longer or shorter based on where you put this. And that's what pulse width is. It's how wide the pulse is. Phase width, like I said earlier, is the what I was talking about earlier when I said there's a better way than just using the sync button. Because now you can see the volume modulation is off. Now it's back. And all you have to do is put it on 1 instead of all the way full. And now you're free to fine tune it. So there you go. Yeah. Tune knob works exactly like the fine tune knob or the detune knob, except of course it applies it to all three. And then you have the mod envelope, which is a bit of a quirky control thing. What it does is it modulates one of these three destination things. So attack, what attack does, that's what the A stands for, is it tells the mod envelope how long it should take to get from 0 to 100 after the note is triggered. The decay knob does the exact opposite. After it tells the mod envelope how long it should take to get from 100 to 0 after the attack is applied. And the amount knob tells how much of the mod envelope should be applied to whatever the destination is. So I'll put it on full for demonstration purposes. You have three destinations: oscillator 2, which is the pitch of oscillator 2, FM, which controls the knob itself, and pulse width, which controls the knob itself. The best way to demonstrate would be oscillator 2's pitch. So attack, let's put a fairly high attack there, and then decay. So there you can see it's going down to the pitch of oscillator 1 very slowly because of the decay. And that's what the mod envelope does, and you can sort of imagine how it does the exact same thing to FM and pulse width. Okay, the amplifier envelope acts as a precise volume control envelope. That's what amplification is, actually. It's volume. So the first one is attack. Just like this attack, it tells the envelope how long it should take after the note is triggered to get from 0 to full volume, instead of just pitch or FM. So you can hear that here. Fades in. Then you have decay, which tells the synth how long it should take after reaching 100% volume, after the attack is applied, to get to the sustained volume. See, it's fading out to the sustained volume. If I dial in a shorter one. The sustain can act as a volume control if you want to use it like that. It tells the synth what volume it should sustain at. So lower volumes will be lower volume. And you can modulate the volume there. And then release. The release tells the synth how long it should take to get from the sustained volume to 0 after the note ends. So you can see it fading out there. And note that your instruments will clash together when you add a tone of release like that. Gain is the actual volume control, so it makes it louder or quieter. And velocity is a bit of a quirky control. What it does, or what it's supposed to do, is modulate the gain based on how high your notes are, because in reality, or in in the way that humans are made, higher notes sound louder for some reason, even though they're not physically louder. And so the velocity would apply it, but for some reason it doesn't really. See, it's not doing anything to the volume. That might be because of a phase shift, but you never know. Anyway, now we get to the filter, which is one of the most important effects to learn. You have 3 different types of filters and 2 different types of one type of filter. You have one called low pass, high pass, and band pass, and you have a low pass 24, which is basically just like a higher quality, I guess. So yeah, I use 24 instead of 12. To demonstrate what a filter looks like, this is what a low pass filter looks like. If you click the green button, all this green area is what is allowed through, and this green button is where the frequency knob sits. Then a high pass works exactly opposite of a low pass. It allows the ones above the frequency, again modulated by the frequency. This frequency knob would control where this dot appears. And then a band pass. A band pass looks like this. This orange area is what's filtered out. Only this area is allowed in, and the frequency knob would be somewhere around here. And the frequency, of course, controls that as well. So I'll leave it on low pass for now. And so you get this resonance knob. It's called resonance. What resonance is back when filters were first being developed, they still had distortion because they were being filtered, and this resonance is that actual what the distortion used to sound like. Let's see if I can get it. You can hear the distortion. And so yeah, you can turn that all the way off if you don't like it, but it's good practice to leave just a little bit because it makes it sound more natural. Saturation is a basic type of distortion. It's applied based on your low pass, high pass, band pass, and then frequency knob. So yeah, you can see there it's distortion. Basic distortion, that. And then you have a track. Keyboard track, where we heard that before. Oh, the track button. Okay, so it works the exact same, except it modulates the resonance's pitch. So let's see if I can dial in a lower frequency so you can actually hear it. And so that's what it does. And then the velocity switch works the exact same as this velocity switch. So it's quirky in the same way as well, and that it doesn't really do that much. That'll cover everything for part 1 of this tutorial, because obviously this is a long video at this moment and I'll need more time. So thanks for watching part 1, and see you in the next video.